My name is Julia Foster. I'm 32, a senior data analyst in Orlando who still wakes up some mornings convinced I'm dreaming the life I built from scratch. If you want names so everything's clear, my dad is David Foster, 56, the diner owner who raised me after my mother left. My mother is Marie Stone, 51, the woman who walked out when I was 9, and my half-brother is Caleb Grant, 19, a kid raised by that other life and now suddenly demanding mine. I always start at the part of the timeline that hurts least, the present office, the skyline view, the hum of servers and dashboards that make me feel competent. But even at my best, the past lives in me like a scar you can feel in the cold. Growing up in a 2-bedroom house in Ohio, our life looked honest and tired. Dad ran a greasy spoon diner, David Foster, hands calloused, face lined with the effort of 20 years of opening at dawn and closing at midnight. He is the man who taught me how to flip a pancake and how to do my taxes by the light of a cheap desk lamp. When Mom left, Marie Stone, 30 at the time, she left more than a door ajar. She left questions. She left me with the cold realization that love can be a choice someone else makes to walk away from. For years her "I hope you're okay" birthday card sat in a drawer like evidence that absence can be polite. I learned to barter my childhood for survival. Babysitting, stocking shelves, cleaning houses while the other kids chased prom dates. At 17, I earned a scholarship for data analytics and held 2 jobs through college. I remember nights when I fell asleep in textbooks and woke to the diner's radio before dawn, my life a study in stubbornness. Dad believed I could be anything. He used to say, "Julia, you're stronger than our rent." He never stopped working to make that true. He's the reason I left Ohio with a degree and a small duffel bag of optimism. Fast forward, Orlando, a tech company that pays decently, a 1-bedroom with a skyline I can call mine. I started sending Dad $500 a month. Small token, big relief. I thought I'd closed the chapter on abandonment. Then one autumn evening, a knock at my door cracked open everything I'd sealed. The woman in the doorway smiled like a neighbor remembering a name, not a mother who hadn't visited in 20 years. Beside her was a sullen young man with cheap sneakers and the entitlement of someone raised to take. They had the audacity to ask, no, to demand, money. Not a little. Not for rent or groceries. For a $60,000 college fund and a lifestyle to match. The ask felt rehearsed, and their eyes tracked my apartment the way collectors track assets. The knock was the inciting push that would force me to reckon with the past, with family as lover and predator, and to test whether the boundaries I'd built would withstand those who'd once broken me. I closed the door on the first visit and opened it again to a complicated truth. Some people return not to repair but to harvest what you grew while they were gone. When they came back the next day, I agreed to meet them in public. I remember the cafe lights catching on my coffee, my hands hovering near the cup, feeling the old ache in my chest like a physical thing. Marie's smile was careful, crafted to pull at memory, and Caleb looked bored enough to believe he could bully a stranger into financing his life. I asked questions. She had rehearsed answers. "Your dad wouldn't let me. I was trying to protect you," the phrases of someone who knew how to narrate victimhood. But when she mentioned numbers, $3,000 a month, a $30,000 car, a $1,000 phone, something in me tightened. These were not asks from a struggling mother. They were a shopping list. I told them no. Saying it aloud felt good and terrible at the same time. My refusal detonated the polite facade. Marie's voice turned sharp. She accused me of being selfish. Caleb smirked and suggested I'd forgotten where I came from. People nearby glanced our way, curiosity small and pointed. I left, not because I lacked answers, but because my anger made me clumsy. Back in my apartment, trying to focus on work, panic replaced irritation. My laptop buzzed. An email from Dad's account forwarded a message about my job and salary to an address I recognized as Marie's. She hadn't merely tracked me, she'd breached trust, hacking into the man who raised me. Then Caleb, brazen and entitled, opened my banking app on my desk when I left the room for a glass of water. He clicked like he owned my life. I felt that same tiny kid shock, another person invading something private, just as Mom had once abandoned private family moments by leaving. I grabbed my laptop, heart pounding. The logs showed the browser history, the attempted transfers. It was not curiosity. It was reconnaissance. I realized she'd used the past, my father's vulnerability, to map me out. The betrayal stung not only because she violated me but because she violated Dad. I called him. Hearing his voice, raspy from long shifts, steady in its disbelief, felt like glue. He didn't deny that she'd once asked for help. He did deny that she deserved mine. His hurt was different from mine. He'd lost a partner, I'd lost a mother. I took tangible steps. I changed passwords, froze accounts, filed reports, and consulted a legal aid line. Actions are the armor of the betrayed. I also sat with the emotional fallout. Old questions resurfaced. Why had she left? Had she ever loved me? But now a new one burned. What had she been hiding? I combed through small clues. Dad's bank statement showing small, strange withdrawals years ago. Photos suggesting Marie lived comfortably in another town. A pattern of letters and calls that didn't match the story of struggling alone. The more I looked, the less her need added up and the more it seemed like a plan to capitalize on my success. At the center of it all was Caleb, narrow-shouldered, arrogant, using my presence to validate his demands. He was the sort of person raised on entitlement, not gratitude. When I confronted Marie with the inconsistencies, she shifted into performance, hurt, then shame, then pretense of apology. Her apology was a purchase, designed to reset me to giver. I refused the reset. Instead, I began to collect facts. The betrayal was no longer only personal. It was a breach to be documented. In that documentation, I found a different kind of strength, clarity. It's one thing to feel wronged, it's another to know why and to name the exact edges of the wound. Once I had the logs and emails, I became surgical. I went to the police with bank screenshots and the login attempts. They took a report, anodyne, necessary paperwork, and suggested I consult a cybersecurity counselor recommended by the precinct. My world, which had felt safe because it was built from data and patterns, now felt fractured by someone who had used those exact patterns to exploit me. I hired a small private investigator I could afford, someone who believed in facts the way I did. He dug up breadcrumbs. Marie had lived in a comfortable rental, her new husband employed at a regional contractor, hardly destitute. There were credit card records, Instagram posts with restaurant plates, flights. Her poverty was a performance. That realization was bile in my throat. But it wasn't only about money. It was about choices and the stories we tell ourselves about those who hurt us. I found myself battling emotions I'd rehearsed my whole life, the part of me that wanted her approval and the part that had learned to stand alone. Many nights I dialed Dad and confessed small humiliations I couldn't voice to anyone else. He never blamed me, he asked for facts and for my well-being. The more he and I spoke, the more it became clear that the moral terrain here involved not punishment but boundaries. I could, if I wanted, fuel their lives. I could, if I wanted, let them dismantle my equilibrium. Or I could protect what I had earned, the safety Dad had hoped I'd have. At a final meeting I arranged with Marie and Caleb, this time on my terms, I laid out what I knew. I told them I'd discovered their living situation, their incomes, the hacked emails, the bank checks. Marie's face flickered between guilt and calculation. Caleb grew red and blurted accusations, but the facts were like light in a room, they made everything visible. I offered them two options: accept minimal, documented help for emergency medical bills or walk away. I would not fund entitlement, I said. I would not be emotionally blackmailed into fulfilling a script where I was always the rescuer. The choice exposed them. Marie chose manipulation. Caleb chose silence. I called their bluff and watched them leave, smaller than the version in my head. Healing began not with revenge but with repair. I increased my security, restructured my finances, and wrote a letter to Dad, long and imperfect, thanking him for his sacrifices and for the quiet ways he taught me dignity. I also did something gentler. I reached out to a counselor for trauma survivors. There was shame in what happened, shame I'd carried since 9, and it needed to be unpicked by someone who knew the stitches. With therapy, I began to see patterns. Abandonment breeds urgency to prove worth. Proving worth can look like overgiving attracts predators. The work was slow, the victories small. One night without replaying her face, one morning where I didn't flinch at a knock. In reclaiming my boundaries, I found a new moral clarity. Family does not mean automatic obligation. Love existed in the meals Dad made, in his steady monthly calls, and in the decisions I made to protect myself. Resolution didn't arrive with a courtroom drama or a cinematic denouement. Instead, it arrived in a quiet series of decisions that, stitched together, remade my life. I cut off direct contact with Marie. I blocked her accounts, changed shared passwords, and set legal boundaries through a lawyer who sent a letter making clear that any further attempts to access my accounts or manipulate Dad would result in legal action. Caleb, left exposed, retreated to the life that had taught him entitlement. He enrolled in a community college program and, after some time, sent a perfunctory thanks text I didn't have to answer. Dad and I met weekly over takeout breakfast at his diner. Our conversations ranged from mundane menu changes to the sort of confessions you save for those who've earned them. He cried once, quietly, and I held his hand across the table. Financially, I set up a managed trust for donations I wanted to make, only for vetted charities, and a small fund for Dad's home repairs. I refused to be the ATM for emotional manipulation. That sting of refusal felt like love in a new guise. Love that protects rather than placates. I also channeled my experience into something constructive. I volunteered with a local community center teaching basic financial literacy to teens, how to budget, how to set passwords, how to recognize manipulation masked as familial need. Each session I led was an act of reclamation, turning what had happened into prevention for others. Teaching became therapy of a practical sort. Most importantly, I learned to redefine family. Family, I discovered, is not always defined by blood or by shared history. Sometimes it is constructed by those who show up consistently, who keep agreements and return calls. David Foster is family. The friends who held my hand the night I reported the hack are family. And the grown-up Julia I've become, one who knows how to say no, who prioritizes safety and dignity over guilt, counts as family too. The moral of my story is not a tidy aphorism, but a set of practices. Set boundaries, verify before you give, and don't let the gravity of someone else's absence pull you into solving what they refuse to fix themselves. If you walk away with one thing, let it be this. Generosity is a virtue, but it must be tempered by wisdom. Protect your resources, emotional and financial, like you would any other asset. People who love you will never demand that you erase your security for their comfort. Those who pressure you to choose between compassion and self-preservation, asking you to sacrifice your future for their convenience. I chose not to be sacrificed. Instead, I chose to be whole. That choice saved me, and it is, perhaps, the kindest act of love I could offer the man who believed in me, my father, and the woman I am still learning to be.